So my colleague Steve is going to talk more about that and also assure us that this is a battle that we can win. That is the approach we can take. Every battle we bring before you, every battle we say, Christian, rise up and do something about it, we can win that. So, Steve, my colleague, please go ahead, tell us more about this hate bill.
Well, thank you, President. Firstly, one's got to, the starting point for this is the Constitution, which allows for freedom of expression. It allows for freedom of religion. However, the right of freedom of speech is limited, and it does not extend in terms of Section 16.2 to obviously the proper propaganda for war and the incitement of imminent violence or the advocacy of hatred that is based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and that constitutes incitement to cause harm. So those are the limitations on freedom of speech that have been accepted by our courts. And we had the act that was passed is Popuda, which civilly allows the state to take action against people. And we've seen action has been taken. And we know that there's a lot of racial incidents in our nation. So if you remember the Penny Sparrow case, if you remember other cases, those are civil remedies, not criminal remedies, civil remedies where people were brought before the equality courts for saying the most terrible things and were penalized, as well as in terms of the criminal existing law, which is crimen injuria. And so we from the ACDP side we condemn any racist utterances that amount to hate speech, and it's very prevalent in our nation. However, this bill, which has got two elements to it, the one is hate crimes and the one is hate speech. Now, hate crimes is where you might be motivated by something such as race, for example, to commit a murder. Then obviously it is more this is an aggravating circumstance, and we as the ACDP did not have a major problem with the hate crimes aspect. But when it comes to the hate speech element, the problem is that this is a criminalization which will have a chilling effect on freedom of speech and freedom of religion as it is presently worded. Now, we in the ACDP have been fighting this battle for many years. We have succeeded in watering it down to a certain degree by putting in certain high thresholds into the bill. However, we are still not happy with it, and that's why we voted against it. And I just want to thank the President for allowing us the opportunity to unpack this, and he might ask some questions. But it's very important for us to understand that our courts have made a statement about what is permissible in terms of speech, freedom of speech, which needs to be balanced against utterances that are hateful. Now, it's very important, and this I quoted when I debated this issue in Parliament. It is in the Quilani judgment, hate speech is speech that travels beyond mere offensive expression and can be understood as extreme detestation or vilification, which risks provoking discriminatory activities against a group. Thus, expressions, this is very important, expressions that are merely hurtful, especially when understood in everyday parlance, are insufficient to constitute hate speech. Offensive language is protected by freedom of expression. So this is very important. Now, we believe that the present bill does not live up to that standard. We believe that it can impact very negatively when we as Christians exercise our expressions, exercise our beliefs. And this has been our problem. Now, if you look at the bill in particular, President, you will see that the definitions are very broad. For example, what is harm? What is harm? Harm is defined as substantial emotional, psychological, physical, social, economic harm. What is emotional harm? How do you determine what emotional harm is? I can understand psychological harm, but this definition, and this is one of the problems with this bill, is these definitions are so very, very broad that it can canvas anything. And sadly, hate speech provisions have been used internationally to bring pastors and evangelicals to court who've been promoting the gospel and who've been saying things, and obviously, as you indicated, President, that Jesus is the only way, something like that. That could be offensive to someone else. They could feel that this has caused them emotional harm or psychological harm, and you could fall foul. And that is what has been used internationally. So we worked very hard on this bill as the ACDP, but we are still concerned about the groupings, about the issues relating to harm, and we believe that it does not accord with the Constitution and the limitations that are set out under Section 16(2) of the Constitution, and therefore this could well be unconstitutional. We voted against it, bearing in mind that there is already existing law. First of all, we said there's sufficient existing law to cover these issues, both from a civil perspective and from a criminal perspective. We've already seen, as I indicated earlier, examples of that. Why is it now necessary to bring in this hate speech bill with an 8-year criminal sanction imposed? It is easier to be found guilty of hate speech in terms of this criminal legislation than under the civil legislation of the other act. And this is a great concern. When you look at international jurisdictions as well, there are certain thresholds, because what the approach should be to protect freedom of expression. People must be able to express their views as long as it's not propagation of war, incitement for physical damage as set out under 16(2). You've got to have freedom of expression, freedom of religion. Those are very important. And so an international threshold is very high, which says you must only criminalize it as a last resort, hate speech. Under what I said, it goes beyond mere offensive expressions. And so, President, this is a deep concern of ours. It's a concern of many people in civil society, many churches, even journalists. We did succeed in putting in an exemption for journalists, for artists, for the religious communities, but we believe that exemption does not go far enough. And although it is a starting point, we believe that there are issues here that still need to be protected. So, President, what we are concerned is that this bill goes far beyond what is permissible in terms of the limitations under Section 16, freedom of expression. It impacts of religion, and it may well be unconstitutional because it goes beyond what the Constitutional Court found in the Quelani judgment, and has the potential to limit freedom of expression, freedom of religion. And for that reason, although the ACDP has played a battle at the forefront in prayer and in motivating substantial tests, for example, where it previously said just emotional, psychological, and physical detriment, we now insist that it must be substantial and it must cause significant. So we've lifted the threshold. So we've tried to improve the bill, but we are still not satisfied with it. One of the very aspects of criminal law is that the members of the public must know exactly what the law is, so that when you break the law, you need to know what the law you're breaking. And the definition is so wide. Hatred itself is not defined. Harm is defined too broadly. The groups impacted by this are far too broad, that if you utter an expression or you say something, you do not know necessarily whether you are in breach of this legislation.